The module Fixed Assets is essential in any organization that has a significant number of assets. Fixed assets, particularly in terms of movable assets, have been assuming an increasing importance in terms of operational activity of organizations. The good management of fixed assets must first be based on accurate and constantly updated inventory, which implies the use of automatic means for identification of goods such as barcodes and/or RFID. It is also essential to provide assets with the proper legal, accounting, tax treatment in terms of depreciations, deductions, repairs, and reassessments. Regarding the fixed assets items and also in general terms, we needed to ensure a computing support to the periodic verification of their existence, location, and operating conditions, their displacement and allocation, their maintenance, the management of consumable goods, their maintenance and insurance contracts, and others, the history of events and suitable operating costs, particularly to the analysis of their occasional replacement, the reflections of operations, depreciations, etc. on the value of assets, the reflections on accounting resulting from the changes in the asset values and to the imputation of costs. Yet, the specificity of some goods requiring suitable treatment such as vehicles, equipment, and real estate has to be met. This module has been designed in order to meet all these needs in an integrated way and provide a high level of productivity in all underlying tasks. Note that in technological terms, the management of fixed assets has advanced greatly and it has benefited nowadays from important facilities in terms of optical treatment, barcodes, RFID, and remote tracking. An important feature that's also available is the geographic integration of equipment via Google. Such more advanced features are already covered by our module and will be exemplified in this video. Let's now briefly consider the base menu of this module.
The Fixed Assets menu is divided into three areas. Includes parameterization and communication facilities, as well as the definition of products in terms of fixed assets. We see in the middle the registration of fixed assets and a set of facilities for their daily management, namely, lists showing fixed assets hierarchically arranged in a tree structure, based on the facility that the module has support logical group items. Listings per general ledger account for cross-checking purposes in accounting, general events, transfers, and the association of miscellaneous values, inventorying, are depreciations which may be automatically calculated. We can also see other operations related to fixed assets that may affect their value as well as their reflection and integration into accounting. There are also some options regarding extensions to fixed assets, namely vehicles, equipment, and real estate. There are still geographical coordinates, which are the basis for tracking and geographical location of fixed assets via Google Maps.
The accurate registration of fixed assets, especially if they are sorted and in great number, requires preparation in terms of typological organization and products. It is important to note that in our solutions, a fixed asset is also seen as a product and is integrated into the architecture of the subsystem of products and resources. Let's now move on to the definition of typology and products.
In terms of class of products, we have defined several classes of fixed assets for this organization. Here we see the IBG class for fixed assets in general. Next follows a set of classes for equipment, such as EIT for IT equipment, whose defined scope is information technology, hardware, and so on. EIC, communication equipment, EEI, office facility equipment, etc. And the V class for vehicles and other classes. Entering types of products. With regard to the types of products defined within each class, for the class EEM, General Electromechanical Equipment, and within the EEMGB group, for electropump groups, there are the following types of products: pump and electrical groups. As we can see, the types of products may be hierarchically organized, and the group items are displayed with this G code along with a darker green color. Let's finish this part of the menu by looking at the definition of product codes themselves. Each type of product may combine several product codes. In this case, let's request the EIT class for IT equipment. As we can see, a number of products is displayed in two groups corresponding to two different types of products. First, there is IT equipment, computers, such as keyboard, monitor, printer, notebook, and others. And then IT equipment network, switch hub, and router.
Let's take a look at the registration of fixed assets items.
This option generates the list of fixed assets, including the most important information about them. Some items appear in a different color, gray, right at the top of the listing. These are logical group items defined to better organize and manage fixed assets. It's a very important facility and one of those that distinguishes our module. Here is a group that consists of a generator and accessories, and then 4 office furniture sets. Upon selecting this office set 001 and jumping to group items, we get the composition of the group. We see this set consists of a side desk, a table, a chair, and a big cabinet. Returning to the list and moving on to actual items, in green, we see several items, and so let's check some information. Here we have quantity 1. Here is this new asset, and the application shows the meaning of these codes, the start date of its use, tax parameters, organization unit, activity, location, value, and book value. Going back to the jump prompt box, we see there are jumps to many objects, such as these ones. As these objects are usually going to be addressed further on, we shall analyze these jumps later on. The same goes to commands. Let's see these two options, hierarchical listings and listings of items per account. Hierarchical listings show assets arranged in groups. This arrangement is essential so as to treat group items related to particular functions and purposes instead of treating many single items having no relation with one another. This can help reduce, for management purposes, thousands of items to hundreds or even fewer groups, which facilitates the treatment of fixed assets items. Let's see a hierarchical listing. Here we have the defined groups highlighted in gray. The group of the generator still has no connection with its component items. However, this office set does. After the groups follow the basic items, which are no part of any specific group. As for the information of the columns, it's similar to the ones in the registration mentioned above. Let's see the list of items per account. This listing is crucial to link items to accounting and is widely used for cross-checking reconciliation purposes between fixed assets and accounting. As we can see, this listing is arranged by accounts. Here is the Not Applicable field. We see an asset that is not linked to an account yet. Then we see the accounts 422, 423, and 424. Please note that by arranging items per account, we are actually performing breakdown per month from the beginning of each given activity, as well as per code from an applicable tax table. Such a breakdown is the most appropriate one for cross-checking purposes. However, it's possible to get a detailed item-by-item breakdown if desired.
Regarding fixed assets, all events deemed important will be registered under the designation of general events. Note that these events do not have the same amplitude and detail of interventions, events, available in extensions for vehicles, equipment, and real estates. In terms of extensions, we are at a more specific scope and the information is processed in a more detailed way, and is also more integrated with concrete daily operations. However, under these general events, provided the extensions have not been subscribed yet, other events may be registered in a brief way, namely maintenance, overhauling, repairs, inspections, etc. As for transfers, this is a particular type of event that often occurs within fixed assets and has important reflections in terms of inventory and accounting. Now, sundry values are used to register the values directly linked to fixed assets, as well as those that are deemed relevant to their management. Again, under extensions, if subscribed, this information may usually be processed in a better way. There are, however, some values such as those related to deductions and surplus values, which must be registered under this option in order for them to have automatic effects over accounting. All this information allows the analysis of relevant facts that have taken place in terms of a given fixed asset, and therefore, better decisions can be made. Let's consider these options.
Under these options, we have access to general events, transfers, and miscellaneous values. However, in order to better understand these facilities, we will access it via fixed assets items, straight into the record of the asset. Let's see it. By entering this list, which we are already familiar with, we choose this desk and jump to its events. Here are two events. As you can see, there are simple records on events that have taken place. Some drawers were repaired and the top replaced. Note that events may also be entered with future dates. This enables alerts to be made as well as procedures to be scheduled. For instance, we can assign an event to fire extinguishers on the date they should be replaced, and that will be alerted in due time so as they can be replaced and/or recharged. As for transfers, let's jump to transfers under the same item. We see in here three records that represent the history of the asset in terms of its location in the organization. We see that it was initially placed in the Organization Unit 11, then moved to the Organization Unit 12, and finally to the 14. In fact, with regard to any of these columns, the system allows establishment of a history report on the different locations a given fixed asset has had within the organization, thus allowing its full tracking. Beyond the scope of organization units, transfers from buildings, sites, and responsible parties are in fact very common. Let's see this example regarding sundry values. Under this item, Generator and Accessories, let's jump to Sundry Values. And so we see the operating expenses from 2007 onwards. We remind you again that in the modules on extension to fixed assets, such as vehicles and equipment, such information is processed in more depth.
The key issue around inventorying and handling of fixed assets is linked to the identification of the assets, which requires an effective labeling, preferably machine-readable through optical treatment and/or RFID. Also, the location of those assets must be subject to that same type of labeling or tagging. The inventory is based on the registration of the site according to its label, and to the record of assets that are in that site and which are linked to it. This is for comparing what is in the inventory with what is in the system. This module is prepared for processing a variety of labels and tags, for the generation of the files required by reading terminals as well as the import of the files generated by them. The records of assets are updated based on this import, and so get in line with what has been inventoried detected in the site. Here's how.
Inventorying is a critical issue for managing fixed assets. Losing control over fixed assets in terms of their existence as well as their location may pose a big threat for many organizations. There are, however, some basic precautions that should be taken into consideration in order to prevent this from happening. A very simple one which our module provides is the lists of assets per responsible party and site, which should be posted in many places. We enter this option and ask for the IRP list in the criteria panel. Here we highlight the place and the responsible party, followed by the breakdown of assets. The lists allow a proximity control of the assets, and so the responsible party can check their status in a periodical and expeditious way. Other types of lists may be obtained as well, particularly the IAV list, items to be checked, which is generated by the system and checked by the inventorying team, and the IEX list, existing items, which results from the collection at those sites of existing items by means of visual inspection or PDAs. That's to be compared with the system later on. Nevertheless, labeling is crucial for this to work well. Later in the chapter on tracking, we shall get back to this issue and illustrate barcode labeling and RFID tag reading. Let's see how barcode labels are generated. This is a typical printer for that purpose. These are quite resistant plastic labels. The label is printed as soon as the command is executed. These labels are stuck on the equipment, but this is not all. They are also stuck in places so as to become clearly visible. Let's see now the reading process. Here's a PDA, and here is an optical reader. This is a label identifying the room at the entrance. I read that label with a PDA like this one, and I then read the labels of all the assets I can find. By doing so, I create an inventory list of the IEX type, as described above. The system then compares this list with the one recorded in the system and marks any anomaly in the list. It also marks the assets that are in a place contrary to the one registered in the system, and marks the missing assets. Thus, based on those remarks and on automatic means, the record of assets may be then adjusted according to the physical inventory.
The highlights regarding the module fixed assets are a series of operations such as depreciations, amortizations, deductions, compensations, and reevaluations that affect the value of the items and, as such, must be reflected in accounting. The bulk of these operations over fixed assets items may be triggered over a selection of records through the use of commands. This does not prevent general and mass processes for bulk operations from happening, such as, for example, the calculation of amortizations for all assets. When triggered, these operations generate all the necessary reflections over both the value of the assets and the integration in accounting. This is what shall be presented next.
We get under this option operations involving fixed assets such as depreciations and others. Let's now enter the list of fixed items again in order to better see the connection of these operations with the items. From this item, which shows on the right the value of 200 and book value of 168.74, we jump to depreciations. Here we see three operations of depreciation amortization in 2002, 2003, and 2004. We see in blue that the value of each operation was 10.42. We see on the right that these operations added up to 31.26. Hence, the book value 168.74 after the depreciation of 2004, which is the value we have seen before in the record of that asset. As we have said before, such operations as well as their reflections on the book value are either calculated automatically or upon command over the item or in bulk through general processing. These operations will also be automatically translated into accounting entries. Let's consider the option Accounting Reflexes. As seen in this list, there are typical accounting operations of depreciations, amortizations. There is a credit in a balance sheet account and a debit in a cost account, as this is an example of the Portuguese chart of accounts, that is, credit of depreciations, amortizations in the account number 48, and debit of expenses in the account number 66. The reflexes on accounting we have just seen are locally generated in the module Fixed Assets. They can be, from here, more aggregated and automatically integrated into our module accounting. In case our module accounting is not used, these entries may be exported to other applications.
The tracking of fixed assets in general, contrary to what happens to vehicles for instance, does not need to target routes. What matters when it comes to fixed assets is where they are at in terms of facilities, shipyards, etc. Just as it happens when registering organization units, buildings, and sites, the registration of facilities also includes their coordinates. Provided they have been registered, the items placed in these organization units, buildings, and sites automatically inherit those coordinates and may thus be geographically tracked by Google Maps. Let's see how this geographic tracking works integrated with Google Maps.
Regarding tracking, let's make use of a snippet of the video on equipment produced by our team in Londrina illustrating this feature. Actually, a piece of equipment is also a fixed asset, so what is said next about equipment also applies to any fixed asset item. We are currently seeing a piece of equipment. It's a computer that has just come into our facilities. Let's read its identification with this RFID reader. Nothing is seen in the computer, but the device indicates reading. The green light indicates good reading. The fact is that there is a RFID tag inside the computer, transmitting the identification of that piece of equipment and other data through radio frequency. A major advantage of RFID tags is here exemplified. The identifier is in a hidden and protected place inside the equipment, but it sends out a signal that can be identified even at a fairly good distance. A similar though less advanced solution is the use of barcodes and optical reading. We see a switch with a barcode tag. We can read it with a barcode reader and the result is the same in terms of inputs to the system. Well, we have entered those pieces of equipment into the system. But what does this have to do with tracking? Let's go back to the equipment menu and here's the option called Geographical Coordinates. Let's get to it. Here are 4 positions. Regarding Altoga modules, upon registering an organization along with all its organizational business units and third parties in general, one can also register their coordinates. This is what happened in this example. There are 4 organization units. One of them is the accounting office here in Londrina. We shall select all of the rows in here. And we shall execute the command position on map. Let's get the map of southern Brazil from Google, showing the locations of those 4 organization units. Here's the one in Londrina, the one in Ponta Grossa, another one in Curitiba, and here's the one in Paraguay. We can see more information by clicking on the balloons. We can maximize the dot here in Londrina until we get a street-level map. And of course, we can choose the satellite image mode. Well, regarding equipment, what happens is that when one PC enters an organization unit, and provided it has already been registered at the organization unit at issue, where the coordinates are entered as well, the latter are automatically assigned to that piece of equipment. Then, whenever a piece of equipment needs to be located on the map, all it takes is to proceed as we have shown in terms of the organization units concerned.
We have presented in this video the module Management of Fixed Assets, under both administrative and technical perspectives, along with the necessary details for a first assessment by your organization. It should be emphasized that, according to each organization, we happen to be before simple projects, which can be started very quickly, or more complex projects, including a great variety of items, the use of RFID devices, and also a tracking system geographically integrated with Google. In many cases, the implementation may and should be carried out in phases, starting with the immediate treatment of new acquisitions, followed by the inventory and treatment of existing items. Only then should we move on to the remaining features. In this context, we remind you that this dialogue can be deepened so we can better analyze your needs and our answers to them. We and the network of partners we integrate are fully prepared to listen to and support you.